Wait, is that really how you expected me to start this video? So anyways, I read the entirety of ReZero. I had always been planning to read the ReZero web novel at some point in my life, but I never really found the time nor motivation to do it. While I was interested in the rumors surrounding it, it still wasn't enough to fully convince me to read it. Sure, it sounded good and all when other people and fans alike told me about it, but my burnout with reading in general and the latest season which overstayed its welcome kept me. What got me to read it was actually the existence of another series, that being Mushoku Tensei. Mushoku Tensei was the first ever light novel series I read, and it really opened my eyes towards the genre and made me respect it a lot more. Before it, I tended to label light novels as shittier books, and while I still do that, I far from consider everything trash nowadays. Mushoku at the time was deemed the best isekai by many, and there was no one who really countered this argument except a few. It was the vocal minority of the ReZero fanbase that told me, ReZero is the best isekai, which made me curious. Why did they think that? But that wasn't enough still. Not only did it feel that I was content with where I was, I had no desire to seek out more anime, no less light novels. I was ready to move on and return to reading some high quality fantasy instead. So I passed on ReZero. Months went by, years, and as I started posting anime videos on my channel, I was getting countless requests to read this light novel and cover it on my channel. Why? What could be special enough to warrant my return to a medium I had long left behind? What could it be so special about ReZero? I mean, it was and probably still is the most renowned isekai series out there, along Mushoku Tensei, but back then, and even now, I attributed much of the series' success to the lack of competition, and not so much the work's actual quality. Like, if you look at what ReZero and MT was put up against back then, and even now, you would find it laughable. And if I read it, what of it? ReZero had always struggled with a clear direction of its story, and I didn't have faith that the series would ever find one. What was there even left of the story to explore? More aimless wandering? Back and forth to Roswell's mansion? Side quests and Subaru's suffering? I was honestly fine with just having read Mushoku Tensei. But they did not relent, they persisted, and sure as shit, I found myself with a copy of ReZero to see what it was all about. While I think everybody agrees that Mushoku Tensei and ReZero are the best, the question always remained, which of them is better? Up until this point, I always thought it to be Mushoku. But having read this, my answer might have changed. So it's time to decide. Could ReZero go the distance? Could the series redeem itself? Could it claim the title as the GOAT? So I personally wanted to settle it, which was the better of the two. So what would determine it for me would ultimately be, is Arc 6 of ReZero better than anything I read in Mushoku? With that in mind, I started reading. Is what I would have liked to say had I not searched up a guide on Reddit. No, you can't jump into the story immediately. Oh, for fuck's sake. Turns out you have to read extra side stories, at least some of them, before you can jump into reading. I was not fine with this, since I just finished binging like 13 Cosmere books for the better part of a year. I was not in the mood to circle around the series, but I wanted to get it over with. So I begrudgingly sat down and started reading Extra Volume 1. I would recommend going into this one blind, as I definitely consider it the best of the side stories, and it doesn't require too much context outside of you having watched the anime. They are technically meant to be read in between the story's event, but since I assume you're an anime only, you fucked up the order anyway, so just go ahead and read through 1 to 3 while you're at it. Spare 4 to 5 after. The dream the Lion King saw takes place roughly 1 year before the start of the royal selection and roughly 8 to 9 months before the start of the main story. It's essentially the backstory of royal candidate Krush, the 4th prince of Lagunica, and the Night Fairies. How they meet, who they are, and what their friendship ends up resulting in. I think it serves as a nice introduction to the larger world of ReZero, while also making sense for anime onlys. I was surprised over how coherent it felt and how well written it was. Like, it really reads like a novel. It drags for a little, but after reading it, both Ferris and Krush became two of my favorite characters. Although I think Ferris' backstory is a bit strange, I can buy it. What this does more than anything is put things into perspective. The world is much larger than originally thought, and some really important lore bits are dropped here. Like, Kanika aiding and protecting Lagunica, the Dragon Pact and the Lion Heritage, some suspicious spells and whatnot. For the larger scope of the narrative, this is essential, especially if you haven't gotten spoilers or read the wiki up until that point. But it never becomes too over-expository, which is something I can greatly appreciate. The length of the novel feels appropriate and moreover in accordance with what it's actually trying to tell you. It's all good fun. What I think surprised me the most is how well established their relationship is. It genuinely feels like they are friends, and that their shared bond is what drives Ferris and especially Crucia's character arc. It also makes her memory loss that much more impactful when you realize that she just didn't lose her memories of her past life and lover, but also her reason for existing and pursuing the throne. Before reading the story, I viewed her as a cold-hearted office lady, but after having read that final page, man, she cemented herself as best girl after Ram. I actually find her endearing now, and she's really interesting. I hope she stays alive. The first arc is pretty simple in story structure, have great highlights, and overall really sets the tone for the series. If you've watched season 1, which I assume you have, you probably know as much as me. There really isn't too much to add. It's just amazing. I really enjoyed season 1 due to just how much time it took to develop its characters and set things into motion. The world felt fresh and alive, and I loved how open everything felt. It felt like an open world game without an invisible barrier streamlining the experience. The fresh concept of returning by death also greatly aids the narrative, making it feel distinct and refreshing. And not to mention the highlights like episode 15, episode 18, and 21. It really is the complete package, and as good of a first season as you can get. I still think season 1 is the prime example and remains the best showcase of just how effectively you can use the return by death gimmick to paint the story. I never really minded that the story had no clear objective, as Subaru was just trying to navigate his way through the new world. It was a realistic, uncommon portrayal of what would happen if a normal person like you and me tried to interfere with an alien fantasy world's logic. I was actually one of the few that enjoyed season 1 way more than season 2, and speaking of season 2, I have mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I can clearly see what the author intended for and wanted to convey with it, but on the other hand, I just felt like it dragged, having way too much material crammed into a single 2-core season. Everybody and their mother had their backstories introduced, and while it was effective to some degree, the overarching plot of the Sanctuary and the never-ending list of characters made it a nightmare to follow. The only real problem I have with the Sanctuary arc is that it's way too long, and at the end of it, the only thing they really accomplish is managing to kill a witch calamity, which is good, but it has been done before, by Subaru. That took like 3 episodes and a cell phone. And Roswell also got exposed, which was a huge plot twist. Like, I get what the author is trying to do, but at the same time, man, it drags towards the middle and end. And while a lot of backstories, overarching concepts, and incredible character moments happens, it stays for too long. It's the kill your darling problem all over again. There is supposedly a lot of lore revealed in this season and a plethora of characters introduced, but I didn't feel like it was compelling by the end of it, at least for me. It's long if you look at it, how long it is in the novel. It's like half the series combined. This could have honestly been resolved with better planning on the author's part, but I get it. It must be really hard to write and plan a story like REZERO out, so I can kind of excuse it. Some people like it. Personally, it's just not for me. I value pace, and the story essentially comes to a standstill. Like, while the encounter with Sloth both makes sense for Crush and Rem, Crush for getting her entire backstory and reason for being a royal candidate in the first place, and Rem losing all her character development feels a bit wasted. It's so rare to see an author write an amazing character, then somehow regressing them. While it really shows the consequences of side encounters and things outside of Subaru's control, I can't help but feel sad about the treatment Rem got. Extra 3 wasn't as good, but I suspect my dampened enjoyment was due to me not having read the Extra 2. So I suffered a lack of context of why I should care. Also, the anime already dedicated an arc to Wilhelm and Theresia, so it wasn't really required to know this, unless Bodyguard decides to show up in the main story somehow. Now onto the real shit, that being Arc 5. I was really excited to get into this, because by the looks of it, it looked exactly what REZERO had been missing thus far. So, to simplify things, Arc 5 covers volume 15 to 20 and the additional side stories. To grossly oversimplify the premise, it goes: Anastasia invites the Emilia, Crush, and Feldkamp to attend a gathering in the Watergate city of Pristella. Soon after they arrive at the Watergate City, Sin archbishops of the witch cult appear to take control over the city, forcing Subaru to unite all camps in order to defeat them and liberate the city from evil. And that's it, pretty much. That's what the whole arc is about. We're back to basics and all the characters in season 1 and 2 of the anime reappears, and a plethora of new ones gets introduced. One great thing is that it doesn't feel overwhelming since we already know these characters, so we can focus on the new additions to the cast. And almost all are welcome new additions. They bring something fresh to the table for the duration of the arc. They don't overstay their welcome, like a certain someone. Volume 16 more works as a setup to Arc 5, which I have no problem with. It's mostly just a way to familiarize yourself with the characters again before the story kicks off in high gear. It's really nice to see characters of importance again, as it now feels like the plot is finally progressing after a 24 episode standstill. It feels like we're finally heading somewhere. Also, I would like to point out that a lot of the setup that came out of season 2 gets paid off here. It really feels like the culmination of everything we know from before. There are also some character beats and nice interactions that are welcomed, and I enjoy parts of the slice of life stuff. But it genuinely feels like a setup, which, to be fair, it is. Anyway, past volume 16, shit starts to happen. Everything is suddenly fucked, and Subaru has to unfuck the situation in usual fashion. With volume 17, we see a return of the classical format type used in season 1, which is greatly welcomed. There really isn't too much to say. Some nice character interactions, some nice action set pieces, but nothing that will blow you away. This whole arc can be summarized in 4 words: exposition, fighting, and military talk. And that's it. The most time spent is trying to reclaim the 4 Watergate towers under the control of the witch cult and fighting Cornelius. And speaking of Cornelius, man, he sucks as a villain. He's probably one of the better anime villains I have seen, but he overstays his welcome. I actually loved his appearance in season 2. He seemed like a breath of fresh air and was kind of funny. But the more time you spend with the character, the more you just dislike him. Not in the, oh, I wish he gets defeated, more in the like, you're so annoying, can we move on? Also, the whole bride subplot was pathetic. Like, I've seen this trope done well, and this is a far cry from it. Not only does it feel forced, but it results in nothing. Like, Cornelius doesn't even abuse her. Like, he doesn't do anything. He never gives us a real reason for hating him. Besides being annoying, it never really feels like Emilio is in any real danger, because he's just too evishly cartoonish. The design, character, and concept is really cool, but execution is really tacky. And another thing that doesn't help is that bro is yapping, like, non-stop. Bro graduated from the University of Yapology. This fucker won't shut up. Most of his dialogue boils down to, I'm evil, yada yada. This is mostly present in volume 18, but the latter half of the arc is too much of him. He's not a satisfying villain because we as the audience have no fucks to give about him. You can't expect us to be invested solely due to shitty dialogue. Also, it advances Amelia's character nowhere. Like, what was even the point of this? I will say though, I laughed my ass off when Regulus asked her if she was a virgin, and she was like, bro, I don't know. The whole hand-holding kissing scene just resurfaced. I don't really get why the ukulele girl is there, if I'm being honest. She's part of the council, I guess. The only notable thing she did was do the YouTuber ukulele apology video when the whole city was being flooded. Side note, the plot twist actually shook me now I get why extra volume 3 is important. I did not expect Edo Tensei, but man, it's good to see Bargari again. The only thing I felt like Arc 5 missed was one of Subaru's, defining trauma moments, if you will, where it shows his humanity, like episode 15, season 2, episode 44, like just anything, that adds substance to the character. Like, I didn't feel like it had a real definitive moment. The Cornelius encounter in battle doesn't count, besides maybe the kidnap reveal, but that's it. Also, one thing to mention is that while this arc never developed Subaru, it showed the growth he had gone through during the 1-year time skip. He's a much more vibrant, confident character, which is honestly refreshing to see. But in the author's own words, this was mostly just a showdown arc where everybody got involved. I can't fault it for being that, but this was not better than the peaks of Mushoku. I really enjoyed this arc, and I felt it served as the perfect middle ground, exactly what the story needed to get back to its feet. So, we've finally arrived. So, is it the best isekai? Yes, and it was phenomenal, for one volume. Allow me to explain. The setup for this arc, while it transitioned sort of awkwardly from Arc 5, is downright fantastic. You know from the premise alone that this is going to deviate quite a bit from the set path the ReZERO narrative has followed thus far. The feeling of despair and hopelessness is established long before they even reach the desert. The task ahead of them is almost impossible to achieve, and for the first time, it really feels like the party is biting off more than they can chew. The place, the demon desert, where no one should venture. Demons, dunes, poisonous miasma, an endless sky and no set path. The mystery is definitely what sets this arc up. You, as a reader, have no clue what is going to happen. You're just embracing yourself when anything goes wrong, which it certainly does. Everything from the rumors surrounding it, Reinhardt's failed attempt to traverse it, and the villagers on the outskirts talking about it, everything about this expedition spells suicide. But the party really has no choice. To gain something, they have to risk it all. Another thing that is great is the characters making up the specific party. We have Subaru, who has to die more times than any previous arc to find himself. Foxidna works as an uncertain wild card, whereas you're not sure which side she's on, or if she has any ulterior motives. This serves as a constant factor of anxiety for Subaru throughout the arc. This arc also highlights all of the characters' true selves when put in stressful situations. Some sides we've never seen from other characters are revealed. Ram's downright savageness, Yulia's self-doubts, and the complete deconstruction of Subaru's character. When the spears of lightning pierce them and the whole party is wiped out, you're like, oh shit. Just the way it's written in the novel leaves no room for speculation. They're mysteriously, mercilessly, and violently wiped out. All of them. And everything that follows is perspective. The repeated attempts of trying to close in on the tower, the checkpoint that is placed in the worst place possible. This whole sequence not only feels mysterious and unpredictable, it feels utterly hopeless. By this point, the narrative has made it very clear that this isn't going to be an easy fight. Moreover, the party they have is weaker than it should be. They are clearly not equipped for what's ahead of them. And the repeated loops are fantastic. And it peaks when they fall down beneath the sand. The whole section when Ram, Subaru and Patosh wander aimlessly beneath the sand is one of my favorite parts. It really feels like they've met a dead end, and every loop reinforces that. The expressions they wear, the miasma threatening their sanity at every turn, and the cruel end to each of them. The first ends up in Ram and Subaru going insane, Subaru filled with homicidal urges choking Ram to death, only to then get eaten by the land dragon. Then the loops that follows after, the desperation of knowing what lays ahead, the encounter with the blind and grotesque centaur. However, after this, it goes from a 10 out of 10 to a what? Never change ReZero, never change. However, things get a little shaky as soon as we meet Charla. And then we get into the tower, and I'm like...
Are you kidding me?
From getting one of the coolest set pieces in the series by far to whatever this is, while the mystery surrounding it is very interesting, it kind of loses a bit of momentum with the introduction of Shala. Not only is her character design blander than unseasoned chicken, but her personality is... Like, we just saw the darkest thing ReZero has offered yet, and then we go to like fanservice town. Maybe tone down on the wife baiting clinginess and keep the mystery and suspense going. Because as soon as we meet her, we get to a checkpoint. All the danger is removed for the moment, and while it is amazing exploring the tower, you never get to feel that the party is in any true danger. So up until now, I've had no issues with Arc. It has thus far easily been a 10 out of 10. There's plenty of mystery left exploring the tower, and I had really fun just immersing myself in the setting. Everybody is pretty much clueless, and the mystery about Flugel is pretty well established with just how insistent Charlie is on calling Subaru Master. After checking out the floors, it pretty soon becomes apparent that there is a reason behind this tower's existence, and it turns out that, in order to obtain the wisdom they seek, they must match wits with the sage. It's an invitation to take test of the great Pleiades library. Wait, this sounds familiar. Wait, no way, there's no way we're redoing the Sanctuary. Out of all the directions the story could go in, I couldn't predict it would be this one. It's good, very unique, but like, what? At this point, I feel like we're dangerously close to retreading on old ground. This crush we have spent like literally half the series exploring is returning. I don't know how to feel about it. Yeah, it's one of the most bizarre things I've read, period. Like, it makes zero sense narrative-wise. Or, no, it makes sense in hindsight, but when I first read it, it caught me off guard. I had such a different vision of where the story was going, so this like genuinely caught me off guard. Once again, it makes sense in hindsight, but the first time reading it, it threw me off. And yeah, what follows after this is kind of a clusterfuck of different story bits, as we have to essentially follow them unraveling this mess of trials and character drama. The first trial really isn't anything special, and while it's unique, it seems a bit too convenient. I also feel like we're getting to the part of the story stage where the meme tapping on its way to add 10 new mysteries and subplots and resolving none of them is getting like too relevant. Anyways, after clearing the first trial, they get access to the library and start reading books. This whole section felt befitting, although maybe a little out of place. Subaru is just like Quoth, searching the archives tirelessly for the Chandrian. This is the end of phase 1 essentially. As you can tell, this is a setup arc for what's to come. After having the rules explained to them, they head over to the next trial, where they meet Read REZERO, a person they're severely underqualified to handle. Besides falling for a literal trope, not a single person besides Emilia can get past him. Raid fondling Emilia's breasts with chopsticks was not something I expected to ever see. They withdraw for the night to the 4th layer. Eventually, Subaru comes up with a plan to beat Raid, but it turns out, when he wakes up next morning, that he has lost his memory. This starts a long journey of him having to essentially rebuild his entire character, which is done masterfully. This is, in my opinion, the heart of the arc and ultimately what cements it as the best. This instance of character writing might be some of the best I've seen in anime, period. Losing everything and having him relive through everything he did in season 1 was incredible. Not only did it reinforce how blind the audience had become to the world's cruelty, but also showed how much Subaru had grown since to be this confident in a completely unhinged situation, and what he had to overcome. It was a nice point of reflection, although I have some qualms about it that I will touch upon later. But besides that, the murder mystery and the flawless execution of his character was just so good. At first I didn't get it, but when I read it all, it made sense. This memory loss easily leads to the darkest loop he has ever experienced, as the weight of expectations, fear, and paranoia manifests in insanity. Everybody's dying, and he has to confront the same weakness that once before defined him. Everybody depends on him, but he can't even depend on himself. This leads to an endless spiral of fear and distress, until he actually confronts his weakness in order to protect those close to him. Him coming to terms with how he needs to accept the outcome and ultimately carry on with the burden of knowing that he will never get himself back is such a raw, bittersweet way of saying goodbye. Things have never looked more hopeless, not only for Subaru, but the entire party. Ultimately, it gets resolved, but this character writing is on a whole other level. Like, it's actually a masterpiece, and I mean it when I say it. And the cherry on top is the scene that follows. I will say, like, holy shit, that last scene with Emilia was outstanding, fantastic. Like, I was close to getting feels while reading it, it was that good. That last deconstruction before the tower gave in made up for it. It returned to being a 10 out of 10 just for a moment. Phase 4 is essentially the completion of Subaru's character arc in this novel and is fantastic. Him acknowledging himself, and when he is at his lowest with nobody by his side, a familiar voice calls out, demanding him to live. I'm not going to lie, I actually got emotional when Rem came back and saved him. Like before, she was there for him like no one else was. Rem made Subaru stand up again. Man, this girl deserves the world, and Subaru. Subaru doesn't deserve her. That whole scene was just perfection. Him finally standing up, reuniting with his other half. She couldn't have made a better comeback, and this couldn't have been a better conclusion. The remains of Phase 4 and 5 is basically one final showdown. While the pacing is atrocious, I get it, there's a lot to wrap up. The final fight against the three siblings of Gluttony and Raid plus Volcanica is fantastic, but it should not be 400 pages long. It's impossible to have an audience invested for that long, when it's just chopped fighting with terminology thrown in. I will say, Emilia gaining authority was pretty hype, but nothing that could compare to the quality of the other phases. And by the end of it, the party gets out, and more importantly, Rem is back, and she is alive. The consequences of having escaped the tower have far outweighed the positive, and they have definitely lost more than they have gained. I don't quite get the teleportation thingy, but oh well. But when Rem woke up and Subaru told her the words she had told him once before, let's start from zero, it all came full circle. My words can't do it justice, but every bit in this arc was so goddamn good that I honestly just recommend you reading it if you haven't. Everything I ever wanted out of ReZero happened in this arc, and more. Every story segment in hindsight made sense, and besides the clunkiness and rough editing, she was fire. Now onto some criticisms and issues I had, and yeah, my issues essentially just boils down to a few things. My two biggest gripes are the handling of mystery and the pace. For one, I felt like he could have used the desert to add more mystery and environmental storytelling, something Phase 1 excelled at. Also, having Shala being introduced as the device for them to get into the tower makes sense, but yeah, while she cute crazy girl that everybody loves, as a character she's wet toilet paper, I'm sorry. Also, while the memory loss leads to the absolute highlight of the arc, I felt like the reason for Subaru actually suffering it was a bit shoehorned in. It's like only after they even acknowledged that, oh, there's a byproduct of reading the recollection of dead people's memory. I just felt that it was neither foreshadowed or well explained, but it doesn't detract from anything, just a thing I noted. I don't want to say that the removal feels artificial, but it kind of does. It also just sort of happened out of nowhere, it really just hits you. While the female sibling was interesting and a well-executed parallel, I think Roy and the other sibling are so painfully underwhelming villains that it sort of cheapens it. And if you're going to have them fight, at least keep it to a minimum. We don't need more gluttony after Arc 5. We only needed one, that being Lou. The others could have just faced off against Ram and Julius and be defeated. Their ass, get them the fuck out of here. Another long-standing criticism I have is how he writes battle scenes. The battle scenes are way too wordy, and I swear, like, half the word count is explaining how the abilities works. I swear to God, if I hear Tappy describe the witch's authority one more time, I'm going to I would deadass rather see a fist fight instead of having to read whatever this is. I get that ReZero's diverse magic system can be really hard to put on paper, but I just felt like these drawn out battles are just too much. Like, you can't retain the reader's attention for 400 pages during the climax. Tone down the word count. The ending also felt a bit rushed, and we're definitely having the problem of too much introduced and not enough explained. It's really starting to bother me and can be a huge problem in the future if it doesn't sort it out. This was likely due to Tappy's insane time schedule, but the result is undeniable. Shala dying was honestly a relief. I thought she was fun, but she definitely disrupted the tone of the arc as a whole, so I just wish she was introduced after part 6 instead of being a quintessential part to it. Her lightheartedness and being a hoe really didn't fit the depiction of hell on earth. Like, in any work, the suspension of disbelief is so important. Like, can you imagine Dalinar and Adeline riding away from the Parshendi over the bridge but getting stopped by a cute anime girl? No, it would ruin the stakes, something Taipei has yet to realize. It's like playing the piano and hitting a wrong note. It's noticeable and disrupts the rhythm. Taipei needs to start tying up threads instead of introducing new ones. Also, Volcanica's intro was kind of underwhelming, and his meeting with Emilia was a bit of whatever. Plus, the dragon blood stuff was just a plot excuse. Like, come on, like, what do you mean you need another dragon's blood? Like, for fuck's sake, like, come on. And apart from some revelations about the tower, nothing really new has been introduced, and nothing was really explained, just more questions added. It is as if Arc 6 was just a really long prologue for Arc 7. And speaking of Arc 7 and 8, it's good and has some amazing moments, don't get me wrong, but the issues I have with the series only continues to grow after, especially with the scope creep. I also agree with the Foxidna and the return of Anastasia is kind of half-baked and thrown in last minute. Granted, she has a reason, but I really wanted a betrayal from her. Also, are we just not going to elaborate on the sage? Mark my words, this is going to bite the author in the ass someday. And another thing is the japping. It's so much japping. Like, imagine if the Orsted encounter first and second would prolong for 10 chapters. It will lose its momentum, something Taipei yet has to realize. It's so good, but the pace is killing me. Don't get me wrong, Arc 6 has the best moments in ReZero. But like, it's been 50 pages and we're sitting around the same campfire entertaining unfunny banter and meta commentary from Subaru. Like, it's partly my fault for speedrunning it, but yeah, still, the pace is atrocious at points. The question remains to be answered. Is this the best isekai? And my answer is yes. I think Arc 6 by this point has done enough to outcompete the best of Mushoku. Besides some characters, bad pacing, and questionable narrative devices, I genuinely have nothing bad to say. I enjoyed it thoroughly until Phase 5, but yeah. Is it one of the best anime arcs ever though? It depends. If they adapt it perfectly, cut out a lot of monologue and really focus on spending time with Phase 3, then yes, undoubtedly. But I feel like if the production team somehow makes even one mistake, it will drastically alter the public's perception of the arc. Like, this is a very delicate arc with just how it's handled. I will say, as for quick comparison with Mushoku, they're two different stories, so it feels a bit unfair to compare. But I think Mushoku Tensei has godly pace in comparison and better characters across the board. Maybe not better characters, but more realistic. Also, Mushoku's dialogue and banter is much, much better. Mushoku's main cast dynamics and villains are also tenfold better. Much can change with Mushoku's long-awaited sequel focusing on Rudy's children, but in order for Mushoku to reach this level, Hitogami somehow needs to unfuck the 6 realms so we can expand the world and compete. But as it stands now, I agree. I feel like it's also important to address this while we're at it, but yeah, so ReZero fans saying this is the greatest anime arc of all time, I guess, sure, if you want it to be. And for the people saying it is the best arc of all time and clears all of fiction, just stop the cap.
Stop the cap! Stop the cap right now! Stop the cap! No bullshit, bro.
You can acknowledge that it's your favorite, but don't be ignorant and say that this is like objectively the best thing ever. Like you haven't even read 1 million, no less 129 million books. Like, what are you yapping about? Like, I get that it's bait, but at the same time you're just making yourself look fucking stupid. So say it's your favorite, but don't say it's objectively the best, because you can't know that. Although I don't quite get the angle of the author trying to incite a nationwide spanning war when we as the audience hardly is invested in any of the nations at play. Especially when the fandom is hardly united behind a very slow and at times flat out boring arc 7 and 8. Like, series like The Wheel of Time and Stormlight have a reason to incite galactical wars and planetary annihilations. I'm sorry, ReZero, but
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
ReZero is never going to reach that level, so calm down with ambition. I respect it, but know your limits. There's level to this, so just be humble. But all in all, I'm very satisfied.